Good evening, everyone. I am Heidi Ferguson, and next to me is Fidesta Ramsey, and this is Cocktails and Pajamas, and this is our 50th episode. As we were talking about this earlier before we got on, I was like, I never imagined that we would have come this far, and we have, and that's because one of the things that we've talked about for each other in our relationship is continuing to show up, because the importance of that, there's nothing else but the importance, really. In my opinion, I think that's one of the most important things as far as commitment goes, and not only for myself, but also for Fidesta, my partner in this, and also for those who are viewing this. So thank you for being here. Fidesta, I'm gonna let you introduce Lecia, and then we will do some check-ins.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you for being game for this as my partner, because I excitedly watched Lecia's post and was like, oh my God, we must get this goddess on the call. And Lecia, I met at a silent retreat out in Joshua Tree many moons ago. And while we were pretty quiet those 3 or 4 days, there was an energetic, I felt, just kinship in the sweet moments of passing that we had. And then I've continued to follow your career, and I'm hearing it as a spiritual and fit coach. Is that right?
Yeah.
And just wanting to know about your world, particularly with your recent post, really sharing as an ambassador, a way to model difficult conversations. So please, is there anything you'd like to be seen in or that I might have missed?
No, that's beautiful. I thank you so much I'm just honored to be here with both of you and sharing the space with two incredible goddesses that, as Heidi said, are continuing to show up. And that really is the practice at the end of the day, is when you feel called to, that spiritual assignment is kind of how I always say, what's my spiritual assignment for the day? And understanding I'm not always going to feel like, yes, that's what I want to do, but remembering the impact that you have and the influence that you both have in your communities, it's really beautiful. So thank you for choosing to be leaders in that way and for having me on. I'm really excited. There's so much to share. And I am most certainly an open book as a spiritual fit practitioner, coach. My background is fitness and personal styling, both two industries where I met multiple women, I would say hundreds of women going through their own ups and downs with their bodies and self-love. And ultimately, when we met at that meditation retreat, that was my awakening, which is really fun to know that that's where we connected. It's been a journey for sure. I think it's what, that was maybe 2016 or 2017. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Right around there. And it was then that I recognized that I couldn't separate my beliefs and love of embodiment work, not just working out, not just, knowing how, if you desire to style your body in a certain way, but really feeling safe in your body as a woman and learning how to navigate all the seasons that we go through and honoring ourselves, especially living in a society that doesn't really honor women as we age. That was something when I hit my 30s, I started questioning, will I value myself when I have children? Will I value myself as I get older? Will I look to myself as beautiful and radiant from the inside out? And so that's when I got really serious about connecting to my own inner self and teaching women how to do the same, and to really just be excited to live in this one body. This is the vessel that we get. So that's the work that I've really transitioned into. It's taken many different vehicles, I guess, whether it's been coaching. I have a podcast now, and I do weekly courses, or 8-week courses and one-on-one coaching. So it's all just this passion and love for bringing women home to their bodies.
Wow. Yeah, I can feel that radiating from you, just as you talk about that little extra twinkle in your eye and that
I get excited.
The flow, the ability to almost be easily channeling your truth. Mm-hmm. And I know that likely had a lot of pre-paving work to now have access to that. I'm assuming that's my projection. So I'd love to do even just a quick check-in, all three of us. Lecia, please, I'd love for you to go first. Of how are you coming in today? What's going on in your world, and what's alive for you that feels, intimate and that you'd want to share?
Thank you. That's one of my favorite questions, is what's alive in your world? Like, because it brings you to the present moment. And for me today, I have a lot of excitement. I have a lot of enthusiasm. This is my ovulation week. I'll just throw it out there for the group. Like, I just really track my cycle. And when I'm ovulating, I'm really like on fire. I'm just excited. Things, and it's not maybe every season, but during that part of my cycle, I tend to be really excited and have a lot of high energy. So I'm really coming in here with the intention of just connecting with both of you and really sharing value with your community. So I feel, if there was a number, I feel like an 11. This is like what I live for. So I'm really, not to put pressure that anyone else has to like feel super excited for life right now, but that's where I'm at.
I love that.
Oh, I'm at 11. Okay. No, I'm not at an 11. But I'm pretty high up there. So I am in a different town in Pennsylvania. I'm visiting my mother, and she just turned, last week, she just turned 87.
Wow.
I know.
Happy
I
birthday.
know. 87. God bless her. And so anyway, so she's leaving next week. She spends 6 months in Pennsylvania and then 6 months in another part of the year that's a little bit warmer. And actually, it's a lot warmer. And so I'm visiting her for the last time until she leaves. And it's been more of a task-oriented visit, although we did have a moment yesterday where it was a little more connected, which was really sweet. And also, I was pleasantly surprised because we don't have those that often. So anyway, and like I was sharing with Fedesta earlier today, we had a little bit of a check-in of our own, and I sleep really well at my mother's. I don't know why, but I really rest. I feel my bones just kind of sinking into the bed. And I would say, I kind of replenish when I'm here, and I don't get here, but maybe once every, 4 or 6 weeks when she is on the East Coast. So anyway, and I would say I'm probably like at a 7.5, 8. And I'm excited to be doing this tonight.
I love that.
So sweet. Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that reflection.
I really appreciate just even knowing like numbers, even though I know they're fluid, right? They could be changing, but just in the moment, it's soothing to me to track my people's, like, just the mama bear in me just feels better knowing how everyone's doing. Not in an entangled, codependent-ish way, but just in a cool, like, I can be attuned to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm in the higher numbers too. I don't know what it is, but it's like glee numbers. And I gave notice at my last finance job on Monday. So I was holding 8 financial, consulting jobs over the years. And as my coaching practice started to grow, I could like let go of one, and it was my little responsible, secure needs, way to do it. Not a great white knuckler. And and so that was just like such a moment of like such an act of self-love. Like, this is not my mountain. And it was actually an act of love, speaking with the CEO, to be like, I want someone who can hold this for you. And I've got dreams. And like just the compassion, I think I shared this with you, Heidi, of compassionate leadership, where she's like, I am so happy for you. What an amazingly elegant problem to have, that you can't do your day job anymore because your dreams are coming true. So it was just this sweet, respectful, caring relationship we've had for the last few years. And yesterday did a workshop called Braving Intimacy, which is just all the relational skills. and just really felt my seat as like a relationship educator. And just was like, feels like a new chapter budding on the inside, even though we're also like in the harvest in the autumn. It's like harvesting time for my spirit.
Yeah.
I've done the work, like launching pad. So I'm extra excited to even just be in this container with you all.
Yeah.
That's alive, and I'm actually more alive with that truth out, right?
Yeah.
Like what my mountain is and what it's not. So finding that clarity like that and truth telling can be bring up my aliveness.
There's a release in that, there's a liberation and a release when we take the opportunity and we feel into our nervousness, our excited nervousness or whatever, and we do it, taking many big breaths along the way, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, and then, the breath that we feel, we're like, oh, it's kind of like the balloon, the air is slowly sleeping out of the balloon. It's not like a pop. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation. That's how I'm feeling. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and it's the relief of alignment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lecia, I'm curious in your world, even if as I say that, like alignment, what that provides for people.
That's so interesting because I've been on that word today. I do want to reflect back to you, just congratulations. And, knowing yourself and saying like, I am a white knuckler. I'm like, get me in there. Let's go. And it's one of my gifts is enthusiasm. So, it's learning over the years though, that there's the fool and then there's the wise fool. Like there is time and spaces for things. There's resistance. And then there's just like, I am procrastinating on this. So I'm really excited for you. I'd love to hear, coming from a very corporate world through fitness and fashion, like to hear that you had the compassionate leadership. I most certainly have had my experiences with both sides, and being an entrepreneur now, it's just it's a wild journey and it's all really beautiful. So bringing it back to alignment, I just had a conversation with my coach today about how that word feels sticky for me right now. And there's a new discipline being born within me right now. And I enjoy the word discipline. I don't know if it's from being raised by two military parents and my Capricorn rising. It could be anything. I don't know. It could also be, I really love mastering the mundane, because I feel like when there's so much talk of, these ethereal terms sometimes of like quantum leaping and manifesting. And at the end of the day, I'm like, absolutely. I work in the realm of the body, which is like, it's in the here and now. And so this is why we come back to the breath. This is why when I'm working with a client and she's dealing with anxiety, like tonight I'm teaching a class at 4:30, a free class about healing emotional eating patterns. And where are we when we're out of alignment? What does that feel like in the body? Because I feel like when it comes to alignment, it's a feeling. It's not even just a feeling, it's a knowing. And sometimes, this is what my coach and I were discussing, it's our work to get ourselves into alignment. And that practice is sometimes kind of mastering those mundane tasks of like, all right, I'm going to send out the email and I'm going to make the call. And they're not as exciting as like the getting in front of and presenting and getting to live your gifts. So when I think of alignment, I think of peace. There's a lot of peace. I think there's also excitement, as Heidi was saying, like the excitement, the energy. It can be all of those things, depending upon your experience. So when you're going to do something, intention is really necessary. Like I always say a prayer before I come on camera and call all my energy back home. Like I'm right here. I'm not going to check my phone. I'm not going to think about that masterclass. It's like, this is where we're sharing this energy. And that to me in itself kind of brings me into alignment with my intention. Makes sense.
It
Yeah.
completely makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really relating to that on a lot of levels. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious about something you were talking about when you are when you track your cycle really carefully. And so I'm curious, when you posted several, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, wasn't it? About, right? Okay. You know what post we're talking about on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. When you posted that, I'm curious to know where you were in your cycle, because, and I would assume, I know it's not, we shouldn't, I hate the word shouldn't, but we shouldn't make assumptions, but I'm making an assumption. I'm assuming that you at that point are tracking your cycle, like you said. I'm curious where in your cycle you were when you were feeling all that energy and decided to be like throwing it all into the wind, and here I am. I'm going to be transparent and
yeah. So I was actually on my moon at that point. I was in my menstrual cycle at that point. And I'm usually really withdrawn. And this is energetically, that's a very intuitive question, because even though I'm aware of my cycle, I allow it to be different. So while I may sort of coach my clients, like when you're first getting to know your cycle and hormones, maybe during that week, sometimes it's a radically wild thing for a woman to be told to rest. Just rest. You don't have to get your ab workout in. You don't need to go running. But if you have the energy and it's natural and it's from a space of love, and you're saying, and you're really like, I want to do this because like my energy is high, I want to go, then like, okay, this is the discernment that we're practicing. Now, for me, the first 3 days, I just want to be in my little cocoon. I love my cycle. I enjoy that time. It feels very inward and full of like guidance. I had just finished the fatigue and the body aches and being isolated for 4 to 5 days. So my like one of my shifts right after experiencing COVID was having this beautiful gratitude for simple things, like being able to hug my roommate who sat in a chair outside my door. And I'm a big physical touch person. Like that's how I show love. If I'm out in an event or meeting friends or family, like I really like hugs. I really like putting my hand on someone as long as they're not like going through anything that they need their space. So it was just like being able to sit outside. I was wearing a mask inside the house. She's, just to like make sure I was being safe for everyone involved. So it was nice to just like feel like I had all these abilities again. So my energy was very different than it maybe would have been at that time. So it was a very much a timing thing. And so I was like, you know what? I feel good. I was like, that's why I made the post. I was like, I'm feeling good. And I really do believe that that post was inspired to remind people that fear is also a virus.
Yes.
And one of my greatest takeaways, my dog, sorry. One of my greatest takeaways was, she knows she's not supposed to be on the bed. But when I'm talking and stuff, she's like, maybe she won't see me. So anxiety, I've noticed as a fitness coach, and I'll just bring this into the body really quickly, is in the mind, but it shows up in the body. So say I have someone that I'm taking through their first high intensity workout, and they're noticing that their breath feels tighter, feels more constricted. The more they think about it and focus on it, the more it can become a feedback loop of I cannot breathe. I do not feel safe. So I've intuitively learned how to help guide somebody through that practice. And what I noticed was when it when I was going through, do you all mind if I just dive into what my experience was like having COVID? And okay.
Please, yeah.
Oh, okay. So one of the takeaways I had and I was sharing with my roommate is two things. I've worked my body in ways that like she gets very sore. I have days where I'm like, oh, I really like crushed myself yesterday. I've done this for years though. This isn't something that I just started. So I have an awareness of like, this is just part of what I do because it feels really good to me. I enjoy breaking my muscles down. So when I started to get body aches, it was really easy for me to kind of compartmentalize it and just say, she's fighting the good fight right now. She's doing her job and I need to align with my body and give myself rest. But I could see, because the fear thoughts did pop up, like, what if this gets worse? What if I have to be hospitalized? It's not like we practice so much that, and I won't speak for everyone here, but I definitely don't feel immune to fear. Like, no matter how much I've practiced, I can still hear the thoughts that have been all over media and have been said by my family members to me, like, well, you should have gotten vaccinated because now look what happened. And so I felt this shame and I was dealing with all the emotional kind of pain from it, but also understanding that that would do me no good to pour my energy focus into those thoughts. So I just let my body know I felt the pain. We're in this. It's okay. I didn't want to. Sometimes when there's pain in the body, I know for me personally, I can retract, kind of like, you know, if you stub your toe, you almost try to like run away from the pain. You're just like hopping around like, ah, even though it's a sensation, it's feedback, it's a signal from your body. So there was that. And probably around day 3 was when I started to feel pressure on my chest and my heart felt a little like fluttery. And so because I've also done sprints and done things to the point where I'm having a tough time breathing, but I just trust my body. I'm like, oh, she's going to catch her breath. We're fine. I know a lot about the physiology behind it. I was able to stay calm and just kind of bring it down into the belly. It's okay that right now, this is what my body's telling me. Of course, if it was like I needed to go to the doctor, I would have. But what I have found is in my experience, I've watched people have panic attacks while they're, and it made me question, you know, how much of symptoms are in our mind or are amplified by that. So I really wanted to get on and share that, like, it felt like a gnarly flu. And I was not sharing from a space. My intention is never to share from a space of my experience negates yours. It was simply, this is my experience and I'd like to share it with you because I'd love to breathe life into the fact that, like, it's really important how you've developed your mind and your thoughts during this time and going forward. So that is kind of my share, I guess, behind it.
I'm really appreciating you for showing up and sharing what I feel is a really vital message right now, knowing that fear does not serve the immune system, knowing
Right.
that our mind can play tricks on us. And then, as you said, this discernment of knowing, when is it time to get help? And when is it time to rest? And can I trust? Hearing trust, a lot of trust on level of your body, level of that you've poured a lot of care into your body so it can care for you in this moment. And then trust that you can discern and make wise choices from that place. Right? Yeah, that feels really important because Heidi and I were talking about all this fear that's been poured like for what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
Right?
Or more. Yeah.
Chronically, like chronic fear. And
At that point, for sure.
For some people, acute, right? If it's related or impacting them. And the conversation I don't hear as often is, hey, there's trust. You know, I love this breathing life into, there's other ways to go about this that don't have you flailing.
Yeah.
That's also, that feels healthy to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the greatest, at least my experience of talking to, you know, being in the spiritual community, there are people who've been vaccinated and then didn't want to share that they've been vaccinated out of fear of retribution, judgment. Like, well, don't you just trust your body? And, you know, I've always looked at it like this, and maybe this will help anyone who hears this message, but everyone in my family got vaccinated and I chose not to. And I had to check in with myself because part of my journey 8 years ago was becoming very ill physically from chronic stress and being handed medication that my rebellious nature refused and found alternative medicines. It was a longer journey, but it made me it's really developed me into the woman that I am today because I took that path. And I'm not saying, if you do choose medication, that's wrong. We all really ultimately know what we need. It's the pervasive messaging that can get to a point where we can lose our own inner voice to an external, I guess, authority.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty natural, right? As children, we're told to trust adults and our doctors, and we're coming from generations of just like what the doctor says goes. And so I had a fear at first that showing up in this way would trigger someone who maybe lost somebody to COVID or is afraid to. And it's necessary that, in my perspective, that we all show up and share our experiences, because out of fear of not saying of saying my truth, that this is how it happened, this is how I worked through it, I navigated it with my mind, I spent time being with it. When my mother decided to get vaccinated, I prayed over the medicine, I prayed for the nurses and doctors, and I literally visualized it going in and just like holding hands with her cells and and being like, I'm here for you, and building her up and healing her, because that is her choice. And I think we get to decide the risk that we want to put ourselves in, if that's getting vaccinated or not getting vaccinated. That is the decision that each and every one of us, when we come home into the body and you resensitize, you can truly feel if it's a yes or a no for you.
Right.
And I think some of the kickback that I got was, as a society, we have a responsibility to get vaccinated. And I know that that's another pervasive message that goes around, like, we should worry for everyone and take on that. And I admit that I don't have like the most perfect answer. I just have the answer that I chose at this season, at the age of 34, and the level of health that I am in. I made that choice. And yes, there are stories that I have heard of perfectly healthy people not doing well. Sometimes I have a hard time really trusting the information that I receive. I'm like, but do we know everything? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do sometimes wonder if there are agendas. And for me personally, being someone who has now helped multiple women get off medications, including, my mom, someone who trusts me, like, it makes it difficult for me to just stay silent. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating that, Lecia, because I mean, you've covered a lot of ground here in the last few minutes. And so, one of the things that I'm appreciating the fact that we all have our journey, right? Regardless of what route we take. And one of the things that I'm noticing about myself is, in my own journey, is had I not been simply paying attention as we are going through the journey, instead of just making decisions, okay, that's my endpoint, let's get there.
Yeah.
Because of the person that I am, I want to feel, and I want to know, and I want to be aware of everything that happens between here and there.
Yeah.
And so, and this is simply my opinion, my perspective. This is Heidi Ferguson speaking. It seems to me that many people who have made the choice to get the vaccination, we're just like, they're again out of fear, and still in a state of fear, right? Because whatever's going on. And so, and I hate to use the word quick fix, but that's how it feels to me. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying, to me, that is how it feels. And so I feel a real sadness there because of instead of saying, okay, I'm going to get the vaccination, but what is the journey between here and making the decision to get the vaccination? Instead of in your own head saying, okay, it's available, I'm going to go get it without thinking about the consequences or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so for those who are watching and listening to our viewers, I'm curious from your perspective, regardless of what, whether or not you've decided to get it, how you went about to make that decision and how careful, like, yeah, what steps you took to make that decision. And there's no right or wrong answer. I want to really state that clearly and and model that as the three of us are doing here in this conversation, because your decision is your decision no matter what, because it is your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to state that across the board about everything that we do with our bodies is our choice. I feel like I kind of went off on a tangent, but I just felt it was also really important to say. So how do I even get back to where I was?
No,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that made
Okay.
that, just to reflect back to you, like, that made so much sense. I love that you broke it down to what was that journey for you. And that's why, I think for me, taking a pause, some of my family works for the state. And so there was it was, you get vaccinated or you don't work.
Right.
To me, that felt just like, well, like, there's no choice there. And I was speaking to my roommate about it, and we had a conversation about, even when you die, if you put on your driver's license that you are not a donor, then you are not a donor. You cannot have, like, your body is still sovereign in death. So a very interesting kind of thing that, like, in life, it is not, even though that could save a life. Right. And that's what we always, it was just wild. I was like, what a weird way to, like, think about it, that even in death, you have sovereignty over your body, but not right now.
Right.
Yeah. And why, right? I like to go into the psyche of, how does fear make us into fundamentalists, right? Mm-hmm. How can we check ourselves? Clearly, there's different people are drinking different Kool-Aid, reading different scientific data. I don't believe the differences are as big of a problem as how we deal with them, right? Mm-hmm. I do couples coaching. There are partners who are vaccinated and partners who aren't, and they're both swimming in this media debris that's basically creating wrongness for their person, right? Like, your person's wrong is what they're having to swim through every day and fight through every day. And what I say to them is, having differences is not an issue. It's how are you going to treat each other having those differences? And to both be able to zoom out and go, wow, we're both getting barraged with pressure from the media, from government, big pharma, to be against each other. Like, that's the problem. That's the zoom out to me, is the sadness that's creating divisiveness on top of trauma. It's like, oh, you guys, we just need each other right now. And I think we can all continue to model having conversations where we may differ in our opinions, but can hold respect for another person.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know everybody's history, their psychology, their trust in certain big, I'm calling it like mass media, big pharma, or government, right? Everyone's got their relationship to that. And I really loved our Peruvian shamans who were doing some ceremonies in LA in October. In their little dialogue around the COVID stuff, said, this was my favorite thing to read last week, was, we respect your medical liberties. And please come in with like a negative test versus being vaccinated and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of it because it's some humans from another country, and also quite conscious humans. And I'm just noticing, like, how come, I don't know if any of us have an answer to this, there isn't this, we're in the land of the free, right? So I get confused sometimes.
But are we?
Well, that's my question, is like, do we get to protect and have our medical liberties? And can everyone, this might be the bigger caveat, expand their capacity for their discomfort with it?
That is actually my post I made today about discomfort.
Yeah.
And leaning into, thank you so much for those reflections. I love conversations. I really feel, I mean, it's my personal belief that we just heal in conversation. When we can bring an open, like, something someone may say may trigger me, but how can I be with that discomfort? As you said, sometimes it's just so helpful to hear, like, okay, well, what is, and I think we don't lean in with curiosity often as a society, at least here in our country. I feel like there's not a lot of curiosity. Well, tell me why. Instead, it's just, you're wrong. And you both, shared your sadness around it, because at least in my experience with both of you thus far, there's a lot of ability to hold space for maybe somebody who doesn't agree with your experience. And I know that was my choice from the beginning, was to say, I will not wrong somebody for their decision. I will stay curious. I will stay open. And at the end of the day, how do we teach that? And I think it's conversations like this. It's also being a leader. If you are showing up on social media and leading the conversations, always back to love. Like I said, unless it's someone who's like being very abusive and just name calling, at the end of the day, it's about us and it's not about us. Like, I show up understanding that it's necessary for me to just share experiences. And from those experiences, what were the ways in which I was willing to just stand in my truth, regardless of if it bothers somebody else, it upsets them. Maybe that's actually perfect. Maybe my statement was supposed to get them to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, right? But I do know that we teach by just leading our own lives and honoring ourselves. I think we might have talked about that a little bit before the conversation started here. How can we honor ourselves and help ourselves feel safe when, like you said, there's so many messages coming from multiple outlets saying that you should be scared, you should be in fear. And as a spiritual practitioner, it is literally my work to see what could be, not what's right in front of me. What's right in front of me is a shadow from thoughts that have happened over and over before. It is my work to see what's next, or what could be, what's the possibilities here? What is this fire of refinement coming through to do? And how are we resisting that? It's like a bigger game happening in our environment.
Yeah.
And I want to say, to your point, I love, Lecia, just this idea of like, wait, how do we do this better? How do we do this with love? Right?
Yeah.
That's always, to me, a question that can soften us and at least give us a sacred pause before we say something that may be hurtful or maybe fractured, right? Maybe divisive.
Yeah.
And then to your point, Heidi, I don't think you called it a magic pill, you called it something else.
Quick fix
earlier. I think I've known this to be true when people are in fear, right? There's a desperation to be out of fear.
Yeah.
Therefore, a magic pill, and I'm not calling the vaccine a magic pill, but the speed at which we hurtled towards it was fraught with fear and probably some, post stress disorder. And we're each allowed our pace. I think that's an important piece, because we get this thing of like vaxxers, anti-vaxxers. There's very little room in the way the lumping is happening of people, which is already sad. There's very little room for like, well, what about not right now? What about I still need more data? What about I actually believe in my immune system? Like, what about maybe in the winter? Like, how have we gotten so tight on yes or no versus like the totality of a spectrum, right? Like, we're not coming off a factory line all meant to do the same thing. So why would we expect any personal choice to be different?
Right. And we've talked, the word pause has come up a few times, and I am a believer and a practitioner of, practicing the pause, because when we do that, we not only are doing that for ourselves, but we're doing that for those around us and those that we are holding space for. So if we, if whatever side of the coin we're on, if we not only pause and hold space for whatever decision others make, and and have it reciprocated where that's done for us as well. I mean, just imagine something as simple, a simple practice as pausing as opposed to reacting, and just letting whatever vomit comes out of our mouth, because once it's out, it can't go back in. And so one of the things that I've been practicing during this time, and I will say not at 100%, but certainly doing my best, is having more awareness around it so that I don't just vomit words. And if the thought comes up, I'm like, okay, let's just breathe for a moment, pause. If I feel the same way in an hour, in 5 hours, in 12 hours, in 24 hours, that's one thing. But if I feel very differently, then I'm glad that I waited. And it wasn't meant to come out of my mouth or on, typing on a post or whatever. Because I just feel like the media has done such a great job with dividing us. I mean, it's us too, because we're participating, but the media has done such a great job with the fear mongering and creating. And so the fear is what's dividing us. And it's almost like we don't even know how to get back together. I feel the division is so great that it's like, how do we mend this? And one of the things that I would suggest for those who are interested in listening to others that may not agree with them, and it doesn't just have to be about the COVID vaccine, it could be about politics, it could be about human rights, whatever. Pause, take a moment, breathe, and then when you're stay curious, when you're having a conversation, actually be intentional about having your mind and your heart open, so that you can hear the other person as they're conversing, as they're sharing their side of the story, as they're sharing their personal experience.
Love that.
I just feel like as humans, that is the very, very, very least we can do. And it feels like a lot. For some people, I get that it feels like a lot. It feels like a really big step, and it might be a big step. So maybe the baby step is, okay, I'm just going to take a moment and I'm going to breathe and I'm going to pause. And if that's all you can do, give yourself credit for that. I'm not being I'm really not being trite or sarcastic. I'm being serious, because some of us are so hell-bent on being right and feeling this way and I'm not moving and I'm not budging. Well, do you want to be in a relationship or do you want to be right? I mean, I've heard that statement so many times. So, like, how do you want to be in the world? How do you want to be relating to people? Yeah. So I feel very passionate about this, and about speaking my truth, and about hearing the truth of others, even though I may or may not be in agreement with it. But and the reason I feel passionate about listening to others is because I undoubtedly always learn something. I learn something. I don't know what I'm going to learn, but I know that I'm going to learn something simply by listening.
So beautiful. Thank you for naming that, Heidi. And thank you for also, I can reflect back to just naming, like, baby steps are okay, permission to be messy, trying this, because it's not just lead with curiosity and listen to learn, which I think are the main highlights here, but it's self-regulate.
Yes.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm enduring a trigger. I want to defend my scared animals online, and I'm not going to do that right now. Right? I'm going to trust I'll get seen too. And that we'll both have grown from that experience. And that's a lot. It is asking for a lot because a lot of people haven't practiced how to self-regulate.
Right.
So it's like, right?
Yeah.
And just also this place of, I don't know, it's the world I hope for, where we just go, okay, knowing what I know about you, that makes sense. Your choice makes sense. Like, how sweet and validating.
Yeah.
To say, cool, like we both are taking care of our health. We
Right.
both care about our health, right? Common ground is always available somewhere. Oh, we both got information, did the best to distill that information and made choices for our health.
Absolutely.
Like there is some similarities in underneath the differences there.
Yeah.
So Lecia, to you, I'm curious, you've been talking about this almost on the somatic level, on the body level of enduring, and then how does that translate? Maybe it's the sacred pause, maybe it's the self-regulating in your work, or even in this topic. How can people really have their own backs and then have someone else's back in that kind of a conversation?
So juicy. Just like listening to both of you, I'm like, exactly. Yes. The pause, the curiosity, the common grounds, like, and it's remembering this is the work that I do is when I start helping women come home to their bodies, it's feeling safe in your body. It's will I trust myself enough to not abandon myself? There are so many layers. I always say healing is never linear. And so it's necessary to come home and learn those practice. And like you said, we don't teach these things. I think it would really behoove us as a society to like teach relating and how to go by your own design. Like even if you are like I'm a very enthusiastic person and I get very like big when I get super excited and then I feel, and I believe that we're entering the age of intuition and energy, and we are kind of at the forefront of it, of the more subtle relating, which is, there's a lot that's not being said sometimes. So if we can step back, take that pause and say, where's this person really coming from? And that does take a lot of practice in the beginning. And from what I hear when I was talking about like the anxiety being triggered and stuff, it is a lot of fear. And fear manifests in a lot of different ways, just like anxiety manifests in a lot of different ways. So it can be hard to track it from person to person because we all are unique in the ways in which our nervous systems are set up. So when we become, I call it resensitizing your body. When you become kind of more sensitized to your own and create a relationship to your body first, to where, like I said before, with my cycle, I am deeply intimate with my own womb space, my own cycle. So when I notice maybe my energy is different, I don't necessarily feel like it's rigid, especially showing up in this incarnation as a woman. I'm like, well, and having a cycle every month, what is that for me? How do I make meaning with that? And knowing that not everyone is in that same space. Not everyone has done that work. Can I have compassion for them and see them through the lens of love when I feel triggered? Because guaranteed, speaking about relationships, I've been single for the better part of 2.5 years, working on my own triggering, because at the end of the day, I took responsibility that my relationships were ending multiple times and the only common denominator is me. So, okay, maybe I take a step back and I pause and I get curious about why that keeps happening. Whereas I think we're taught to have, and we are almost trained to have instant gratification, to Heidi's point of quick fixes, quick distraction. I feel a little bit bored. I love observing people when I'm out and about to get a feel for a room, to take in information of like how unconscious are people in the moment. And there's no right or wrong, but it's just like, where do people drop out of their bodies and just into the mind and into the cerebral and into like the entertainment. And so when I go out shopping or if I'm standing in line, I'm always just curious on how long it takes someone who's standing in line to just go
Mhm.
And I'm like just keeping an eye on it, because right now I just started posting on TikTok, for example. I realized that is quite an energy drain if I engage with the app. If I'm just posting and I walk away from it, but that's another level of self-training. This is why it's spiritually fit, because it's so many layers of really training yourself to take that pause, or to not immediately want to lean out of the discomfort to look or to get the vaccination because out of just fear. And if that is what happens, how can you have compassion for yourself? If you do come to, like, I've had a few people who approached me after that post and were like, to be honest, I wouldn't have got it had I spent a little bit more time thinking about it. And I was like, that's okay. At this point, there is no going back. So love yourself and really speak to your body in that way. I'm a firm believer that we have a lot more control over what happens in our bodies when we harness that focus.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things in there that I'm like, I want to
Throwing them all out.
so many morsels. Yeah, particularly I think what I'm experiencing is the vulnerability of sharing, and I resonate with this, being the common denominator in treasured relationships not working, and then being like, I've got something to learn, right?
Oh yeah.
That felt so beautiful to me, because that personal responsibility is everything. It's like, what's on my side of the street?
Mhm.
Right, and how do I want to show up in the future? It had me thinking about, one of my mentors when I first wanted to make music, get a rock band, make records, do the whole thing. And she said to me, if you want an extraordinary life, it's going to require radical discipline. And I was 27, and this was Debbie Ford, and I was thinking, man, the last thing I want to do is radical discipline. I want to be in a rock band, right? And like, and it got tattooed inside my skull, because I saw her living an extraordinary life, and I could see still a freedom schedule, but a certain level of architecture and infrastructure built into her life that allowed her to do the things that were her highest priorities and highest values. And I was like, okay, like, here I have to trust this process. That's not my process. If I'm left to my own devices, I will wander through philosophy books and poetry books and neuroscience and watch the birds. Like, I can be a floaty philosopher, right? And I started, whether it was discipline with my own emotions, right? Not suppression, but regulation. And whether it was discipline with my schedule, whether it was boundaries with certain people, all of that radical discipline eventually kind of birthed this, I'm not going to call it effortless life, because it's not effortless.
Right.
It's sure as hell enchanting and meaningful and deep and rich, right? Not easy, but so, so rich. So I love that we're coming back to radical discipline, even in a conversation with others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe some acceptance too. I love acceptance.
Yeah. Acceptance is such a freeing word. It's become that to me now. In the beginning, acceptance was like, work, great, I'll accept you as you are. There was some resentment. And now acceptance is like, oh no, that's releasing the chains. Like, I accept, and I bring all my energy home and my focus home back into what I'm creating with that radical discipline. What am I willing to show up for? I'm a firm believer in like the masculine and feminine energies. It's funny, I did that opposite, feminine, masculine energies. And so I always look at that as that structure, as you were saying, having some sort of like infrastructure. It's like the banks of a river. The river is flowing and she's wild and she's got her thing going on, but without the banks, she's not a river. She's just like water going anywhere. So I find it to be, with self-regulations, that is where it all begins. It all begins within. And the vision that I really see for this world is women feeling so safe to say their yeses and say their nos. I mean, my work right now is with women. And I see that I have brothers in the community who are working deeply with men on this practice, you know, total like side note, but it's very relevant. My mom and I were walking up, we go for a walk Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and I personal train her. And we walked up and there was a maintenance vehicle and it had a lot of stickers that were really derogatory towards women and towards our current president, as well as his vice president. And I just like immediately my body kind of contracted, and I just kind of watched the men that were getting out of that van and the way that they were like kind of moving around and the way that they were talking to each other. And it used to be something that like I would unconsciously kind of like be afraid of. And I looked at my mom and I said, helping men release anger is going to really shift and step into their vulnerability. That is not even win, but it's happening now. I really believe these practices are being taught on a much grander scale because of social media. More people are having the ability to read the information, to get it in front of them, where they're seeing examples and demonstrations of people connecting in a nonviolent way and being able to have these conversations. Because, you know, there was definitely a time in my life where I'd be like, oh, really, guys? I had like quite the temper when I didn't know how to self-regulate. My reaction was always fight, which is hysterical for anyone who knows me now, because I'm just like, I'll accept. But that takes patience with yourself as you're going through the rage and you want to black out and go unconscious and be like, right. I have to fight to survive. And there's so much compassion bred out of acceptance and also understanding. So we are taught every day.
Yeah.
I'm just really loving, even within the circle of women here, just you naming that, you know, I often go, man, where have we failed the men? Not in a way of being condescending or judging, but in like, where has society, where have we boycotted the man box, the everything that then completely splits them into thinking strength and vulnerability are different.
Right.
Which is hard for me, because it's like the most vulnerable people I know are the most resilient and the most badass.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that in, because I do think with like Mental Health Day just over and the mental health being, you know, quite high for men, it's really important to remember like we all get to come up, right? The tide lifts all the boats. So we all get to be human. I think that's what I've said before to my partner, like, what if you just got to be human?
Yeah.
Instead of this introjection, these social values injected into, right? And it's almost unfathomable. Like, I don't even know what I would do with that, right? Like, just be able to be human. Feels like a big thing we can support the dismantling of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so much juiciness. I know we could keep going.
I know. I'm like, there's so much we could be like, let's dissect and pull this apart.
Yeah.
And I'm just so appreciating that we were even able to move through some of that content and that conversation together. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Lecia, just so people know, where can they find you? We'll put it in the show notes too. Where can they find you?
I live most of the time on Instagram at Lecia J. Fox.
Okay.
I'm also on Facebook and have a community there. I don't know, have a community there. And yeah.
And your podcast, you mentioned?
Podcast. Yeah, I know. I need like a list, because I'm like, where else can you? Spiritually Fit. It's on Spotify right now and a bunch of different places, not Apple Podcasts yet. Yep.
And then your courses and all that stuff's available there too, if people.
Yeah, you can find all the juicy goodies that are available, and I do free classes like I'm doing tonight, and just to get, you know, women into the energy of it and reminders.
Yeah, offerings I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you. It feels really inspiring, and thank you for modeling difficult conversations being done with curiosity and empathy. It's what I'm
And
feeling.
grace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
may it serve anyone out there who's like, how do I have this conversation with my sister or my, son-in-law or whatever? Like, hopefully there are some pieces in here that resonate as beginning steps towards deeper connection with someone you likely care about,
Mhm.
and hopefully don't want that kind of wedge between. So
Yeah.
Heidi, is there anything that you want to share, or Lecia, in closing?
No, just accept, I mean, yeah, so I can't even, this was so lovely. I don't even
No, I
have
had
the
so much
words.
fun.
I don't even have the words. I'm just so, my heart is really full.
Mm.
And it's, for me, it's such an honor to be in the presence of and to be a part of this circle of goddesses.
Mm.
I mean, my goodness, it's so rich and full. And what an honor to meet you finally. And after seeing your post and hearing a little bit, and then really, getting to know you more here. And we would love to have you back on sometime. You are
Absolutely.
more than welcome. It would just be an honor again.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely more we can unpack. And yeah, so thank you again for your time, your energy, your presence. Those are all such highly valuable things.
Mm.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
bringing your,
goddesses.
thanks for bringing your
So
beautiful
grateful.
medicine, and for gifting our community with some really compassionate ways forward.
Mm. Yeah, I'm really receiving all of that and so appreciative. As I said before at the beginning of this call, now of course getting to hear the ways in which you engage, it's really nice. It's very different from like that kind of like really fast back and forth of like trying to be witty and being in that. I really enjoy that this is just like vulnerable. It's open from the start. It's safe. It's checking in and knowing that there are two women who are, as you said, modeling, demonstrating. I know that this community is really blessed to have you both. So, mwah, thank you so much. And we'll chat very soon.
Thank you.